The history of ice hockey in New Hampshire, it covers a lot of ground, although in this case we should say ice. Geographically speaking, it stretches from Berlin to Nashua and ultimately reaches all the way to Nagano, Japan. That's where 8 young women from New Hampshire, 5 natives and 3 collegians, helped the United States win the first gold medal in the history of Olympic women's ice hockey. What is it about this game that touches us so? Certainly our climate may have something to do with that bond, and more than not, I'm willing to bet it has something to do with our French-Canadian ancestry. Dick, this exhibit at the Franco-American Center didn't come about overnight. There was a lot of work and foresight and planning that went into this.
It really was. The origin of the exhibit, or the artifacts as you see it, was an idea that actually François Elise had, and I have a little bit of history with the state of New Hampshire as far as hockey is concerned in the city, and so we kind of bounce ideas off each other how we could put this together.
Francois, it was a couple of years ago you called me up and we talked about the possibility of this exhibit, and I think I remember saying to you, you have no idea what you're getting into because of the volume of material that was there. Mm-hmm. Was I right?
Mm-hmm. You're absolutely right. I recognize the significance in that large aspect of it. Mm-hmm. But the volume of work and the care that we put into collecting the materials and all the people we talked to was really staggering.
John, I've seen one, and I knew the guy real well. He walked in with a scrapbook and he handed it over to François, and he said, take good care of this because this is part of my life. That was the kind of motivation that was put into this thing to get what you see here today.
At this point, it really hadn't been explored in New Hampshire historically, and that's what we did.
We have hockey history from beginning in 1887 to, I would say, with the Freedoms, which were the last team to play in New Hampshire, well, 1990. So you're talking well over 100 years of hockey.
One of the things I really like about this work is the stories, and listening to the experiences they had, and the friendships that they made, and how significant hockey was in their life at that time.
When you talk about towns with a passion for hockey, you have to start with the town of Berlin. Only there could a parish priest, Father Omer Bosque, borrow against his life insurance policy to help the city build an ice arena. Now you know why Berlin embraces this sport with a passion that borders on the religious.
The winters were long. That was on our side. But I got to tell you, for a team like the Maroons to have a bunch of homegrown boys, I mean, these were, all kids out of high school, be it Berlin High School or Notre Dame, that, our parents worked in the mills. Mm-hmm. And that's where the league started, with the Brown Company Mills and the International paper, back in the early 20s. Our dream, if you were a hockey player in Berlin, was to play for the Maroons.
Some of the great people who've been involved in this exhibit are big parts of the history of hockey in New Hampshire. Talk about Al Adams from Berlin.
Al's easy. Al was my mentor. Al was a guy that I really learned, the game higher in high school from, but his involvement with the game of hockey in Berlin, even when I was playing with him, I had no idea just how deep his involvement was, besides being a coach. I mean, he was, I think at one point he owned the team.
The Monsignor who owned the club at that time called me up. It was in June, I guess. It was kind of hot and warm, and he said, Al, I want you to take over the team. I'm building a church. I said, why don't we wait? It's kind of warm. Why don't we talk about this in October? And he said, no, take it over now. So I did.
Al is a very humble guy. Played on that first team that won the Nationals. I was very, very fortunate to be on that team as a rookie that year. Gotta tell you one thing, when this guy was about 35, 40, man, you didn't want to go up against this guy. He was one fighter. He would have a way to motivate you to play that you'd go through a wall for him. That's what you want done? Well, get it done. That's the way he coached. You kill for the guy.
There were no, you take Concord and Manchester, no rinks. Mm-hmm. None in Massachusetts. And what I had to do was call up, as Bobby started in September, I would call Canada and call Massachusetts, they would come up on weekends.
You try to book games.
Yeah, that's right. I had to because we had ice. It was so cold up there that we could play most of our games.
So you'd bring them up to you.
That's right. They came up and played Saturday night and Sunday afternoon, go back home.
So you had a nice home ice advantage too.
That's correct. And then with the new rink being built in Concord and Manchester and also in Massachusetts, then we started coming down to Manchester. It gave a chance for the kids that could skate, and they had more time on ice than other people did, and therefore they became pretty accomplished hockey players. And what the end result was, the 3 championships in 54, 67, and 68. So it was quite a deal, and those are my happy years, and I have no regrets, let's put it that way.
In the southern part of New Hampshire, there was a great groundswell of support for men's hockey, something of an underground movement, if you will, and it was appropriate because the rink in Nashua was actually located underground. Ron, the Nashua section of this exhibit basically could have been done just by having you standing here and talking about hockey in Nashua, because you are hockey in Nashua.
Well, I started it, yeah, years and years and years ago. There's been, I would say, estimated maybe 10 to 20,000 young troopers that went through my program. Yeah, we formed 2 or 3 or 4 leagues, called ourselves the Twin State Hockey Leagues. We formed and we had teams from Massachusetts and New Hampshire. I helped to start the Amherst Youth Hockey Association, the Londonderry Youth Hockey Association.
There was a guy by the name of, he was a French guy too, Labrie, and they built that arena in Nashua, in one of what is now a shopping mall.
Of course, our rink was a horror show. It had low ceilings, and it was just basically an ice surface, what it was.
And it was a subterranean arena because, you had to go down the stairs underground, and there was your ice surface.
The only thing is we don't have a rink in Nashua anymore.
I know, and that was one of the big 3, wasn't it? One of the big 3 links?
One of the big 3, right.
Concord, Manchester, and Nashua.
When we started the Maple Leafs, there was 7 Canadian gentlemen graduating from UNH that wanted to stay in the area. And I got the chance to talk with them. And we formed them as a nucleus and went up to Canada, got some other players, and we competed pretty good in that Granite State Hockey League. And then Tingsboro rink opened. Our rink lost all its gravy time. We lost all our people who used to skate from 10 to 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning. So we went out of business, lost the team, lost everything.
And it's a shame because there was just such passion attached to that organization.
Oh, I mean, it was actually rabid. The fans were rabid. When Manchester came in, there wasn't a seat in the place. Of course, we only sat 700 people, but people were standing up around the boards, hanging on the rafters, everything.
Ron was a kind of guy that played, coached, and as I understand later, came back and coached the Manchester Monarchs.
Al Corvo, the owner, called me and hired me to run the Monarchs while he was losing his coach, Jerry Parquette.
Well, because it was so parochial, each town had its people, and
Oh, yeah.
Never the twain shall meet.
No, well, I remember coaching in Manchester and having the ladies from Manchester reach over, pat me on the head, say, "Don't worry, Ronnie, that was okay,"
When you talk about New Hampshire communities with a great history of hockey, you can't exclude Concord. That's where the legendary Hobie Baker won his letters at St. Paul's School. It's where Olympian Douglas Everett won a silver medal. And if you want the official word on hockey in Concord, I guess you go to an official.
I refereed for about 20 years in all levels, from the youth hockey right up to NCAA hockey with University of New Hampshire and going to Orono, Maine and that, and a senior AHA, which was the old New England Hockey League. I used to travel around and do a lot of the games with them as a referee and as a linesman.
Very physical game at this level we're talking about here, wasn't it? The old
Well,
Blackhawks and Eastern Olympics and Maroons.
It only physical in the fact that you had to be on your feet 60 minutes a game. You didn't get a chance to get off the ice, and it was still fairly fast competition. I mean, not pros, but a lot of them could have been. The Montreal Police came down one time, and they were all big guys, 6'3", 6'5", and they had played in Manchester the night before, and one of their guys had picked Norm Hebert and put him right over the fence during the game. So the next night we were refereeing, I was refereeing, and they were playing in the first period. Some fracas broke out, and I was just skating by the players' bench, and I got a whole gallon of water thrown on me. So I stopped the game, and that was going to be it, no more hockey. And they begged me, so I went back out and we started the game, and they were all on the bench, and these were all supposedly officers of the law. And I went to each one of them, ran right down the bench, and I says, you know, I played hockey too. And I says, any one of you come near me, I says, I guarantee I'll put you in the hospital. I says, and the ambulance is right outside the door. I says, and believe me, I can do it. So we started the game, went on, and never called another penalty the rest of the night.
In the early days of senior men's ice hockey, one of the true measures of the man, in fact, what separated the men from the boys, was the ability and the willingness to play on outdoor rinks, like this one here at Doors Pond in Manchester.
The conditions were rather primitive. Some of these pictures I was looking at here, I didn't even believe anyone took those pictures. They were on Doors Pond Rink.
Was it Matthew Brady, the photographer?
I can't quite remember who it was, but it's amazing that it brings back so many memories. Go up there and look at the rink now. What do you see up there, John? Have you been there lately?
Yeah.
Doors Pond Rink?
Yeah, it's a parking lot.
Parking lot. But that was the home base for hockey in Manchester. Although they had played at St. Jean the Baptist before that.
Yeah.
But this was the public rink up
And
at
it
Doors.
was outdoor hockey and all of
Outdoor
nature's
hockey,
glory.
yes, where you had to shovel them before the game, after, and during the game, and pray the sun wasn't too bright that day.
It was a lot of fun. It was outdoor hockey for most of the time. You had to be a professional snow shoveler first to qualify to be a hockey player.
People would stand in the snowbanks, if you can believe it, around the rink, because that's all there was, and watch the game go on.
We played our games at nights, like at White's Park, or Sunday afternoon at Doors Pond, or something like that.
That's where we had the Manchester Beavers, players around, formed a team, and there was actually a sort of a league of outdoor hockey. So then when the rink came in, indoor ice, wow, that was just beyond belief. It's funny, they jammed it so much, the first few games, the fire department finally came down on the third or fourth night, said, hey, we've got to put some restrictions here. This was just too much mass people. Chain link fence and nothing to sit on. So you got 4 rows of people standing at the chain link fence. So we all moved in there and became the Tam O'Shanters. And we were indoors and everything was rosy.
But you still wore hats even though you were indoors.
We wore hats before the game. We wore the Tams.
That was part of the ritual of the
That
warm-up,
was
wasn't
the
it?
ritual. Concord had a team, Alpine, Tam O'Shanters, Rochester. I can't remember all the league, but it was a great league for 2 or 3 years. It was such enthusiastic hockey, or the fans-wise, they started to import a few players, wanted to get better hockey. So down from Canada they came.
Ringers.
Well, we called them ringers. They called them superior players, which they were.
Yes.
So that's where our league died, and us old guys and helpless guys got off of there, and the Monarchs, no, the Blackhawks, they were next, right?
Blackhawks, yeah.
They came in with Kangaroo and Ray Champagne and the rest of them.
Yeah.
So that became a league in its own, and we kind of faded away.
Manchester's always been known as a mill town. It's a working class, blue collar kind of place, and so is this. It's the John F. Kennedy Coliseum, and for years it was home to the Manchester Blackhawks. And if ever a team epitomized the town in which it played, it was that gritty, scrappy bunch known as the Blackhawks.
I was the captain of the Alpine Club, and then I became their coach. Claude was actually our stick boy.
And he started to build a new GFK.
The Coliseum?
Yeah, Coliseum. And I knew the mayor, what is the mayor Valley on that time. And he taking to build that for the basketball. But I told Mayor Valley, I said, listen, you got a bunch of Canadian people in Manchester, you love the hockey, you know. I said, why we don't put the ice in that? He said, what you got in your mind? I said, I want to start a hockey team.
He borrowed $5,000 from his father and bought the equipment.
My wife said, hey, if you want to start a hockey team, you start by yourself and forget everybody. And I just decided to try it. And I buy the uniform and start to look for all the player and where I find a player and where I find make business a little bit with the Montreal Canadiens to get the player from him, just come out from the junior, and I finally put enough people together to start the team.